always say that doing movies is 80% technical, 20% creative. But when you're doing trailers, it's 80% creative and 20% technical. You're actually constantly looking for the maximum emotional impact of the music. My name's Greg Townley. I produce and mix big movie music. I've mixed over 100 movie scores, including Downsizing and Up in the Air, mixed and produced countless trailers, including 1917, Avengers, Independence Day, and Bladerunner. When I'm working on a film, I get brought in at the last minute after everything is sorted out, and we just come in to record the orchestra and mix the movie. With trailers, we're sort of usually creating things from the ground up. Sometimes we'll do 100-piece orchestra with 10 drummers and 80-voice choir, and sometimes we'll do much smaller ensembles. A lot of times people want their music, especially in trailers, to sound better, but not different. You have to have somebody that can look at a piece objectively. That third-party person is not emotionally attached to it. I don't put my own ego in it. I'm there to help them. The very first thing I do when I get a new piece is I'll listen to their reference just to see what their overall intent was. I have a spec sheet that I send out, take off all processing, all EQ, all reverb, all volume information. I want the rawest possible sound because, again, I'm going to redesign a sonic picture for you. We only do that by completely pulling everything off. And even when you're using multi-mic position samples, I prefer the drier sounds. Don't always use the faraway mics, because if everything's far away, there's no way to push and pull, because where there's light, there has to be dark, right? So where something close, you have to have something far away. That's how you build dimension in these huge tracks. Trailer music is about filling every ounce of the spectrum that you have at all times with every group of instruments. This is a piece of trailer music written by Paul Dinlatier, the owner of Audio Machine. And he brought me on this project well after he had composed the entire thing to bring out certain elements in it and to punch it up. Start with the drums, and most of this is live, but there's some added samples in here. Depending upon the size of the room that we're in, sometimes we'll have up to 20 different microphones and 20 different perspectives. There's a little snippet of just the dry drums. Very small drums, and they progressively get bigger and bigger as time goes on, and then we sort of add fills, which are probably going to be the biggest element of that. So they'll actually do this. And then sometimes we'll actually just add like strange things that you wouldn't realize are in the track, but they do add sort of dimension to the track. Odd things like that that you don't really hear once everything is playing. But the main trick is to actually get things to cut over everything else in a large orchestra. This is what it sounds like with the full complement of both live and samples and added downbeats and fills. And you can tell that it's sort of, there are certain things that are close, certain things that are farther away, and it's all about like spread top to bottom, front to back, left to right. I find that I want to simplify drums. You got 4 drum parts playing one part, 4 drum parts playing the other part, and all of a sudden you can't hear anything. There's nothing that's impactful. As far as layering, I think the biggest mistake that people can make is having 2 different ideas in the same section. It's either emotion, impact, or energy. So you can have impact in the emotional section, but if you have energy in the emotional section, it waters it down. It's 2 different ideas. It's hard for the listener to assimilate. So as far as layering, it's fine to layer as long as you're putting forth one idea at a time. If it's just crowding up the theme or the impact of the piece, sometimes it's just not necessary, and the piece actually stands out a lot better without it. So we have short strings, a hallmark of trailer music. And And I know that those aren't necessarily going to cut through all these drums, so I use the analog strings. This particular patch called Stacks and Bombs with just slight alteration can really, really help a track cut through the enormity that is about to happen. So if I solo these here, so then when I add Stacks and Bombs to it, and it may not sound particularly pleasing when you're actually soloing it. However, it does have an aggression to it when it's trying to go through all these drums. For instance, if I played it without analog strings, you'll hear that it can get lost very easily within the drums. They just don't particularly jump off the screen. And when we add the output sounds, adding analog strings to short strings, marcato strings, in an orchestra enhances it in a way where it gives it saturation and enables it to stick above percussion. It pushes those strings forward enough where they can compete with huge drums and other instruments, brass and such. One of the reasons why I gravitate towards outputs, musical instruments, is they are real-world sounds that integrate really well with orchestra. So you have, brass and winds, you have analog strings, and you're able to achieve something by adding those on top that an orchestra actually isn't able to achieve, but it also doesn't sound like a completely different element. I'm always very respectful of the composers, but if the section's not happening, it's my job to make it happen. I get their MIDI and I have to sometimes re-perform things or re-orchestrate things or rearrange things after the fact, after the orchestra's done, after the composer's done, and hopefully they like it. Most of the time they're kind of like, whoa, how did that, because that's what they wanted. They just didn't know how to get there. I have this joke of either saying something is either loud or off. So everything has to be meaningful in this genre of music. We have brass here. The composer actually really wanted to bring the brass out tremendously, so I'll actually use certain saturation and distortion plugins to bring them, way forward in the balance. And then I will add some downbeats because it needed to have bigger downbeats. I mix the loudest music in the world, unbelievably quietly. Like, you'd barely be able to hear it as we were talking right here. The quieter the music is, it forces you actually to listen. There's a difference between hearing and listening. We hear things in the physical world, but when we're listening, we're using our mind. So when we're listening to a track, when it's quiet, you're actually forced to listen and find out what's there. When you crank it up, you're hearing it. You're hearing the bottom end, you're hearing all of these elements, but you're not really listening necessarily. You're just feeling the impact of it. But when it's super, super quiet, you're forced to actually listen to what's there. All my mixes, actually, if you looked at my session, everything is constantly moving. Everything is pushing and pulling. The whole track moves. Very seldom does something stay static. Like, I'll record an orchestra in a certain way because I know that I'm going to want more space around it. So I don't cluster everything in groups and tight groups and make it a small, even picture. I throw things off all over the place, bring things way forward, push things way back, put things hard left, hard right, tons of brightness, tons of top end, tons of compression, subharmonic frequency. Like, I'll use every ounce of everything from 20 cycles to 15, 16K. You're almost mixing in a three-dimensional picture. That's how you create the dimension. In dimension is huge music, actually.